Joseph.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes I think you need experience to make a better legal argument. It's not enough to just be a lawyer. Sometimes it's better to just have experience. And this is one of those cases where my initial reaction to this shooting, and then, lawyers start making videos talking about the shooting, and they want to make a legal argument, but they kind of ignore some
facts.
Necessary facts that if you brush them aside, make all the difference. But when you've done it for a living, so for example, I was a police officer 10 years, I've been a lawyer 20. You were a police officer for 30 years. The things you see in body camera video are going to be starkly different than what somebody who has no experience is seeing, right? That's the conclusion I've come to. So for example, in this Florida shooting, right, and you have this Washington gun law lawyer making the argument that, quote, the suspect or the airman in Florida that lost his life was, quote, exercising his constitutional right. I don't believe that's enough, right? Because there's one...
Well, of course not.
There's one legal argument that I think he's completely ignoring, and that's called the assumption of the risk. Okay. So you can exercise a constitutional right, and there still be some level of risk. For example, you're exercising your right to free speech, but you're cussing people out in the middle of the street, and you're calling people names, and you're acting like a complete lunatic, and you threaten someone thinking, well, I'm exercising my right to free speech, and all I'm saying is I'm going to kick your ass. And someone believes you.
Yeah.
And then returns fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and in Texas, it's called assault by threat.
Yeah. And so, you have the right to free speech, but that doesn't mean you have the right to threaten. Okay. Same thing with the Second Amendment right. You have the right to keep and bear arms.
Sure.
And I'm 100% behind the Second Amendment. But if you walk into certain situations with a gun in your hand, you are elevating everyone's risk, not just to yourself, but to everyone around you. And that's where you get into the doctrine of assumption of the risk.
Yes.
Okay. And so in this case where this guy, the deputy is knocking on the door, and, everyone says, well, he doesn't announce that he's a sheriff with the first time he knocks. I believe that is based on experience. So when I would knock on people's doors, if I didn't want them to know I was a police officer because I wanted them to actually answer, I wouldn't tell them I was a police officer.
Yes.
Because sometimes they'll assume it's, Domino's Pizza or UPS or somebody.
You don't legally have to announce.
Right.
No.
But if you're concerned about actually getting an answer, so as this sheriff's deputy is arriving at the scene, he's met by this woman who is apparently the one who called 911, telling him that 2 weeks before, she heard a disturbance that she believed was at or near that location.
She's saying that it happens frequently.
Okay.
But this time it sounded like it was getting out of hand.
Okay, which store?
I'm not sure. 2 weeks ago, I was walking by their apartment, basically, on this side, and I was hearing someone yell, shut the up, you stupid B word and all this other stuff, and I heard a slap. Right after it, but I wasn't sure where it came from. Okay. And I couldn't call, I didn't want to call the police and
Which room is it?
1401.
1401.
So the officer is being given facts that would lead him to believe that there might be another disturbance at the same location. So I believe the deputy is concluding that he's walking into a family disturbance. All right. So he's acting like an officer walking into a family disturbance.
And what all did she say?
That 2 weeks prior that she heard someone cussing someone out, and then she heard someone slap somebody.
Heard the B word.
Yes.
Shut the F up B word or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So, and that was 2 weeks prior to this event. So now you're having a successive family violence or family disturbance at this location, at or near this location. And that's what the deputy's walking into.
Sure.
So to me, from my point of view and from my experience, he's walking into he's approaching the situation like a deputy or a police officer who's walking into a family disturbance.
Sure.
Okay. So this isn't some kind of casual contact, which is another phrase that this lawyer uses is, well, you know, he's making casual contact.
At best, that's what he said.
Yeah.
At best.
No. The deputy's responding to a 911 call for a family disturbance. That's what he's responding.
Yeah, and he said this is not like it's a 911 call. Okay, maybe he wasn't a 911 call. Maybe he was flagged down at the apartment complex. Does that matter? Does that change anything? Because she didn't use a telephone to call 911, you can be flagged down and just told, hey, there's a fight going on upstairs. It's exactly the same thing. It's a reportee.
Well, the reason I'm concluding it's a 911 call is because at the very beginning of the body camera video where he's talking to this third party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe it is. I was just saying it doesn't matter.
He's telling her that his check-by unit, the guy that's his backup unit, is also going to arrive, and to help his backup unit point him in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably trying to keep her out of the doorway. Little Karen, probably.
Yeah. And so the next point that this lawyer makes is that the deputy knocks on the door and then he steps out of the
severely knocked on the door.
Yeah, viciously,
viciously,
and steps to the side of the door, and instead of standing in front of the people. Well, in our profession, or my prior profession, I guess, when I was a police officer, we call that the murder hole.
Yes.
You don't stand in front of doors.
It's a danger area.
Yeah.
They don't call it that for a reason. They call it that for a reason.
Yeah. That's where most police officers get shot.
Yeah. Most people, soldiers and police officers, don't stand in the doorway.
Yeah. So that's a side effect of his training is don't stand in front of doors. He doesn't. He knocks on, steps aside. Okay. And then he doesn't really hear anything inside, or maybe he does. I don't know. You know, obviously the microphone on the body camera is not going to be as good as his hearing.
Sure.
And then he steps back and announces himself, knocks again. And I think at this point he's trying to elicit a response from someone inside. Mm-hmm. And he probably heard something getting knocked around inside, somebody walking inside, or
he heard some noise inside.
Yeah,
that indicates there's a person.
And then he knocks a third time, and I believe when we get a chance to read the report, it's going to say something to the effect of, "I heard the suspect walking up to the door," and so that's when the deputy squares up to the door.
Sheriff's office, open the door. Sheriff's office, open the door. Step out.
Because then he realizes somebody's walking up, not shooting through, but walking up to the door. And of course, the guy opens up with a gun in his hand. Now, without going on too long, what I'm going to say is, if you ever feel like you have to answer the door with a gun in your hand, you probably shouldn't be answering the door. Probably a good rule.
Important safety tip.
Yeah. Because when you do, yes, you have the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. This is true. But when you produce a firearm in your hand, in your sole control, you've assumed certain risks that come with it, like the appearance of you're getting ready for a gunfight.
Yes.
And it is not unreasonable for the people to conclude around you or become apprehensive that you're about to engage in a gunfight, right? So that's not unreasonable. So would it be unreasonable for the deputy to conclude that this guy has shown up to the front door for a gunfight? I don't think so. I mean, the guy's got a gun in his hand. So remember, this Air Force veteran's resume is not posted to the front door.
Yeah.
It doesn't say, here resides an Air Force veteran. Please don't shoot him when he opens the door.
Serving with distinction
and honor. Yeah. It doesn't say that. So the officer doesn't know that. I mean, the officer has no idea who it is.
Yes.
So from his point of view, he's walking into what he believes to be a family disturbance. He's trying to get an answer to the door. He doesn't know if somebody's being held hostage inside or something worse. You know, you have to assume the worst in certain conditions.
Well, he got a evidence where he got a report that there was family violence going on. Not only does he have the duty to check, he has the duty and the right to search the entire house for victims. Okay, if the guy says nothing's happening, what are you going to do? Is go, okay, Mr. Man, go. That's fine, and then you walk away, and then he's got her tied up in the back bedroom. No, you can't let that happen. You can't do that. Okay, so he does have the right and the duty to get the guy to open the door. He does.
Yes, and he does. And again, when this Air Force airman answers the door, and I can't remember his name, it's like Fortson, I think is his last name. When he answers the door with the gun in his hand, he is assuming a certain risk that he knows who's on the other side of that door. And I don't think that there's anything to lead him to believe that it's something other than maybe a sheriff's deputy when he's saying he's a sheriff's deputy. But assuming for a moment that he's not a sheriff's deputy, he's just a home invader, right? Let's just assume for a moment that it's a home invader, not a police officer. Well, it's clear that the airman wasn't ready for that either.
Yeah.
Because the deputy was able to draw his weapon from the holster and shoot him
several times
before Mr. Fortson, the Air Force veteran, was able to react. So why is he opening the door with a gun in his hand? He clearly wasn't ready for what was coming, even if it wasn't a police officer. If it was a home invader, he wasn't ready for it. So why is he opening the door? It makes no sense. It's irrational. It's an irrational response, right? Because so many times when I was a police officer, you would knock on someone's door 2 or 3 times. They wouldn't answer. You would think, well, maybe they're not home. And you can't kick the door in. You don't have a search warrant. Okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to go back to your patrol car and maybe have 911 try to contact the person who called or who's in the apartment.
But think about it. You're going in that door.
Right. But
you're going to get into that door somehow because there's been a threat or a report of violence happening. You have to make sure that there's no violence happening.
Right. Well, I mean, does it come down to getting the property manager to come and open the door?
However you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are so many times when I've knocked on the door and the person that was inside the apartment didn't answer the door, but called 911 on their phone to verify.
Called 911 on the police.
Yes.
Many times.
That happened to me so many times.
I had it done on a traffic stop. I stopped a guy and it's called 911 that I stopped him.
Yeah. And if this airman, right, who is serving with honor and distinction, had any kind of awareness, you would think, okay, instead of answering the door with a gun in your hand, with someone who's shouting their sheriff's deputy, pick up the phone and call 911.
Or put the gun down. And now he didn't have to answer the door. You're right. And I don't know how many times I have said, knocked on the door, and shouted, we're not going away. Or open the door.
Or do what, when I was in the Army, people would do is call their team leader. Or, hey, Sarge, I think I'm in trouble. What happened? Like that phone call didn't even happen.
Well, yeah, he picked up his gun and went to the door. That was ridiculous. That was a stupid thing to do.
And I just think that when he did that, there's a certain assumption of the risk that occurred on his part.
Yes. Yeah.
That elevated what was otherwise not a necessarily risky situation.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. He elevated himself. Like Bratton and Conley always used to say, the suspect decides the outcome of a scene every time.
Yeah.
The suspect determines it.
Right. And in this case, if you're ever in this situation, don't open the door with a gun in your hand. Don't do that. That's stupid. Everybody has a cell phone. Call 911 and say, hey, I think the police are at my door. Can you tell me what to do? And the 911 dispatcher will radio who's been dispatched to that and find out.
1,000 things he could have done, but he should not have opened anything but what he did.
And so that's why I'm so reluctant to just attack the officer on this, because I've been the officer on this call. I mean, that's what's blowing my mind. I have been the officer on this call.
You better believe it. How many times? Hundreds of times.
More than I can count in one district. And that's what really angers me sometimes about lawyers is they are so desperate to try to make a point without experience that they ignore important facts that are necessary to incorporate.
Well, to me, it seems like Mr. Washington Gun Law, who I used to watch a lot, is not only ignoring facts, he's twisting facts. He's saying things that are just plain incorrect.
Right.
Don't do what the left does, and that say he was, killed for exercising a right. You have the right to keep and bear arms. That doesn't mean hold the gun all the time. That bearing doesn't mean you're holding it in your hand.
Yeah, I dare.
Sometimes you have to put the gun down and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And who has the higher who has the higher right to carry a weapon there? That would be the police officer. You don't, oh no, he doesn't have any more right. Well, if you are the guy in the apartment, I'm the police officer, and we both shoot, okay, and I miss, I'm the police officer and I miss, and you shoot me and kill me, what happens? You go to the chair, right? Okay. If I shoot and you miss and I kill you, I get a medal because I'm the police officer. So who has the higher right? The police officer there. So don't say that he was killed for exercising a right. No, that's just not true.
So although I understand your point, I don't think I think that's right versus duty, not necessarily constitutional right.
Well, yeah. Well, yes, but
what I'm trying to suggest is
then where do they mesh in there somewhere?
Well, the officer doesn't walk around with a gun in his hand because department policy doesn't allow you to do that in many cases. And in some states, the law doesn't allow you to do it unless there's an overriding threat.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, that's kind of smart. I'm not.
My point is if you are exercising your Second Amendment rights, yes. But if you walk out your door, even though you're on your property and you have a gun in your hand and you see your neighbor and your neighbor sees you, your neighbor's going to be apprehensive that you're about to do something.
Yeah. Okay. That was my point. You have the right to keep and bear arms, but sometimes you shouldn't.
Right.
Okay, you don't, so it's not total. It doesn't cover you totally.
But the one legal doctrine.
And what is the Second Amendment for? What is the basis of the Second Amendment?
Self-defense. Well, stop government tyranny, really.
Self-defense.
Well, against the government.
Self-defense.
Okay.
It's a right to defend yourself, right? From bad guys?
Yes.
Are you defending yourself from tyrannical soldiers? Yes, you're defending yourself. So everything about the Second Amendment is defending yourself.
Yes.
You don't have the right to defend yourself when you're involved in a disturbance with a police officer. You just don't have that right.
Okay.
I understand. People may want to think they do, but who goes to prison? Who gets a medal? The police get the medal, and you go to prison.
But my point is the one legal doctrine that's being overlooked in this shooting event is assumption of the risk. How much risk did Mr. Fortson, I believe, the Air Force veteran, how much risk did he assume by opening the door with a gun in his hand?
Yeah, we covered that. We've covered that several times.
And that's what I think needs. I
wanted to kind of address a couple of the things that he talked. The attorney, I guess he's an attorney at Washington Gun Law. He says he wants to geek out all the time. Geek out on the law. Well, geek out on the law sometime. Okay, and you say he served with distinction and honor. You don't know that. Did you research it? No, you didn't. You don't know what kind of soldier he was. You have no clue. You're just making stuff up, just like the left does. Just like Benjamin Crump, the guy's civil rights attorney.
Yes.
He made stuff up, said that he didn't ever announce. You don't have to. Can you lie to a suspect and still arrest them? Yes, you can.
Yes.
Does that mean you have? So that means you cannot say who you are, especially when you're in uniform.
Correct.
Because that is a show of force. Being uniform presence is the very first in the force continuum.
Right.
Okay. So, and he alluded that it was not a 911 call. So all he had was somebody said something. Isn't that every case? Welcome to our world, buddy. That's every case every time you walk into a disturbance or a some kind of scene. It's usually he said, she said, he said, she said. That's usually what it is. Every time. Okay. Yeah. There's some, he goes, you had no evidence for a reasonable suspicion. Yeah, you do. You had a report of violence going on in there. You must make sure nobody's in that home has been hurt. You got to. You gotta. Okay. Now, if the guy hadn't opened the door, we wouldn't be having this video, would we? No, we wouldn't. Okay, and you say that it wasn't enough evidence. Yes, it was plenty of evidence, and for him to have reasonable suspicion and clear that doorway. and you know, he said you knocked, and it was casual conversation. I forget what he
Casual contact.
Casual contact. Okay, it means casual conversation, I guess, between the police officer. It wasn't that kind of call. It was not. It was him making sure no one was hurt. That's the first thing. Now, if the guy opened the door and said, no, you can't come in, the officer pushed the door open and went past him and went to the bedroom, and there's a woman knocked out in there, can you still arrest the guy? You better believe it. Just because he said don't come in here, all you had was a casual conversation. No, that's just not true. It is just absolutely not true. You know, he said he could tell the officer to pound sand at that point. No, you can't. Somebody has reported violence going on in there.
Family violence.
Family violence. The officer has a duty to check it. He can't walk away and just not check it out. You can't tell him to pound sand. This is not a consensual contact. This is not officer walking down the street and going, hey, come here. And we're talking about, you know, open carry or something. That's not this at all. Okay. He said he pounded on the door and then stood to the left or the right. Okay. If you had any tactical experience or ever picked up a weapon and stood a post, okay, then I would have a little more respect for you. But you don't. You haven't. Okay? So what do you think that you have to sit there and look in the peephole? You know, shoot me right in the eye, make it quick. You know, no, that's ridiculous. And it just, I mean, and he's suggesting that he did something wrong by going to the left and right, you know, and knocking on the door, viciously knocking on the door. That is just obfuscating. All he's doing is trying to make it like the officer, pump up his ridiculous argument and make it as like it's a better argument because he viciously knocked on the door. What is the level of how many foot-pounds is it before it's vicious and before it fits what you think the police officer should have knocked on the door for a casual encounter? See, that's what I mean. You can't say stuff like that and without being able to back it up.
And that's what's unfortunate is we kind of ignore those important experiential facts. In other words, the officer's walking up there. This isn't his first call. This isn't his first family disturbance. This isn't his first anything. He's done this 1,000 times before.
Yeah.
He's gone through training over and over again, mandatory in the academy, otherwise. So there's certain things that the officer must do, that the law places a duty upon the officer to do, and that is you must fully investigate a potential family violence disturbances.
And also, you know, like the Mr. Washington gun law said, no matter how you connect the dots, no matter how you connect the dots, the airman was wrong and the officer was right. No matter how you connect them.
Right.
All right.
We appreciate your experience, Joseph.
Thank you.
And we appreciate yours too. So comment below. We read them all. And like and subscribe. We always appreciate the new ones. And we'll see you in the next video.